Hey, it's Jacob. Welcome to this new video. Today I'll talk about 3 rules that will make it easy to learn Python as a beginner. I'll talk about why you shouldn't do programming exercises. I'll also talk about how the 3 rules actually work, and I'll give you a practical example of how to apply them in the real world. So maybe you've already tried to learn Python as a beginner, but you got demotivated and you stopped because you realized that it wasn't as easy as you thought. And this experience might have been incredibly frustrating for you. Or you might have looked for help on the internet and every piece of advice you found was intangible and impractical or just bad advice. And it might have made you feel very annoyed and anxious. Because all those things are very theoretical and they are not really useful in the real world where you have real problems. Or you might have also seen people that didn't seem that bright and that seem to have an easier time than you to learn Python. And so when we see those kind of things, we think that maybe programming is not for us, or maybe we should not invest time trying to learn Python. So first, I'm going to talk about what everybody does when they are confronted to those problems. They kind of tend to follow tutorials, or the first thing they do is actually YouTube video tutorials about learning Python. That's the general solution most people have when they don't know where to start. They watch video tutorials on YouTube. And the problem with that is that one, it's passive. You watch tons and tons of video tutorials, but you never actually learn anything because you don't apply it. Because you can't, you're just watching video tutorials. And the second problem with that is it's unguided, meaning that you are not looking for an answer when you watch video tutorials. There is no problems you need to solve right now. And when you think about it, that's what programming actually is. It's to solve a problem that you actually have in the real world. If it's not related to a problem you have in the real world, your brain is going to be asleep and you're not going to learn anything. You can also see things like contribute to open source projects. Now, although it's not passive to do so, the problem with that is that it's overwhelming. It takes tons of time to just understand the existing code. And I'm talking about someone with actual experience. So for someone who is just getting started, I would not recommend that at all. It's not your code. Think about it as learning a language. There is a difference between talking in the language versus reading a text written by a native speaker in that language. You can talk with very simple words. You can't understand a text written by someone who is native in that language. You just don't have the vocabulary yet. And another problem I have with that is it's not that fun. Why? Because it's not your project. You probably don't care about the actual project. And so people say do programming exercises or create a project, create something, create anything. And the problem with that is it's useless as the end user. If you do a project that you don't care about, then it's going to be really, really boring to work on that project because you don't care about it. You don't care about using it as the end user. So if that's you, I made those same mistakes. Everybody does at first. It's okay. However, right now, what you need is real solutions that will actually help you. You want practical rules that won't demotivate you because everything you found so far was boring, demotivating, or impractical. So let me give you the first rule that will actually help you. Start from an existing need. It means starting from something that you actually care about. Let me give you a few examples. The first one would be a repetitive task. Why? Because even if it's small, it has a ripple effect because you're repeating it again and again and again. So it actually has the potential of saving you time. Second example is mindless work because that's something that you probably don't want to do. So if you don't want to do it, not doing it again has value. Third example, a time-consuming task. The value is obvious here. If it takes a lot of time and you create a program that does this for you, then it will save you a lot of time. So there is the potential for value there. Fourth example, an administrative task. And the reason for that is it's often things that are really easy to start with because it's not a complicated process. Often this is very straightforward and therefore easy to implement. Fifth example, a PDF, email, or Excel related task. Why? Because Python has great libraries for this. This is simple to get started and you will always have to deal with PDF, emails, or Excel files. Sixth example, a data entry task. Why? Because it's really well suited for Python. It's going to be very easy to do. And if you're doing this every day, if you're doing data entry every day, then it has great potential for value also. Seventh example, an error-prone task. Why? Because a computer doesn't make mistake. If you're creating a program for a task that is error-prone and there are mistakes happening, all you need to do is update the program. As a human, if you make a mistake, people will tell you and you will learn from it. But you might do that very same mistake again because you're a human. A computer doesn't do that. If you update the program, it will never make that same mistake again. People have a tendency of underestimating this one. So again, these are examples of the first rule, start from an existing need. Second rule, simplify as much as possible. I mean, if you don't need it, don't do it. A lot of people are learning object-oriented programming because Python is an object-oriented programming language. But you don't need it. You don't need to do that. This is complicated. If this is your first time learning a language, don't do that. Learn what is called procedural programming, which is step 1, do this, step 2, do that. This is basically the easiest way to get started. Another example is using data types that you don't need. For example, using dictionaries instead of simple lists. If a list can work, use that. Another example is learning for loops, not while loops. If you don't know what a while loop is, all you need to know is that a while loop repeats an action until a condition is met. Most of the time you don't need it. If you really need it, then learn how to use it, not before. So the mistake is try to preemptively learn things that you don't need right now. Again, that goes back to watching YouTube video tutorials, because if you don't have something you need to solve, then there is no need for you to learn about it. Third rule, learning a single way to do one thing. So this is a good thing about Python, but that can also lead you astray. It's that you can do the same thing in different ways. And I'm going to give you a few examples. For example, if you're using a system command is just something you do on your computer, like opening or closing an Excel, Word, or a PDF file. You can do that in different ways in Python. Learn one way of doing it, write it down, use only this one and move forward. Or if you want to access a cell in an Excel file, do the same thing. Or if you want to move or delete a file or a folder, same thing. Or if you want to list the files and folders inside a folder, same thing. All right, let me give you an actual example of what I mean. So here you can see two ways of doing a for loop in Python. You have a list here, and all you're doing is taking each element of that list one by one. In this loop, the I represents the index of the list, and current element is the element of the list referred to by the index. So if the list is composed of the elements x, y, z, then current element is going to take the value x, then the value y, then the value z. The only difference between those two loops, because again, those two loops do exactly the same thing, is that in the first loop, the number of times the loop is going to be executed is going to be predicated on the number that is here. So if you replace that number with 5, then the loop is going to be executed 5 times, but it's not going to work because here there is only 3 values in the list x, y, z. And here, len is the length of the list, which is 3, x, y, and z. And in the second loop, current element here is taking every element in the list directly. It doesn't refer to the index to take the element. So I explained a little bit how they both work, but the point is, take your pick, choose one, and stick with it. So now that you know the 3 rules that'll make it easier to learn Python by yourself, you can move forward. But understand that if you're going to do your first project and you're going to move forward with it, you might make a lot of mistakes. For example, you might make the wrong choice and have to go backward on your code. Or you might get started but then get stuck because you don't know the actual roadmap step by step to get to the end of your project. That's why I created a free online course to help you with this. You can click on the link in the description to get it. We're already at the end of this video. Have a great day and see you in the next one.